As the nation commemorates the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, a much-loved national institution prepares to play its part.
Had it not been for the victory in the skies above the Channel, then there was a very real possibility that a land invasion would have ensued.
They are a unique RAF flight that fly the historic warplanes that saved our country in its darkest hour.
It's hard to put yourself there, the odds they were facing.
For decades, they've played a major role in the life of the nation, flying 1,000 public events a year, from country fairs to the Queen's birthday flypast.
I've had people in tears because they're just so overwhelmed with the spectacle of our aircraft.
There he goes. Oh, yeah, look at that. Now I'm going behind the scenes to meet the people and the aircraft that take to the skies to honour the heroes who helped save the nation. How come that we managed to succeed against...
It wasn't easy.
I'm David Jason, and 10 years ago I had the privilege of meeting some of the last of the Battle of Britain pilots, my boyhood heroes. And as a qualified pilot, I took to the skies in a World War II Spitfire.
A victory roll over the White Cliffs, over.
Good grief. Oh, you know how to affect a man's heart, don't you?
I'm in the heart of Lincolnshire. RAF Coningsby is a former wartime airfield, now a frontline fighter base ready to scramble fast jets 24 hours a day.
Here on the base, very much like it would have been 80 years ago, we have aircraft fully armed on quick reaction alert, ready to go at a moment's notice, and that would have been no different in the Battle of Britain.
It's also home to a unique RAF flight dedicated to commemorating the nation's heritage.
The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight is a normal RAF flying unit, but unique in the way that we fly historic aircraft.
With COVID, the flight has been closed to visitors since March, but in July they opened their doors to me as they began preparations for this very special year.
So, David, welcome to the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight.
Thank you.
I'm Squadron Leader Mark Discombe, known as Disco, and this is my Senior Engineering Officer, Mandy.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Disco has been officer commanding the flight for 2 years.
For me, I am living out my boyhood dream. It wasn't just being a pilot, it was about being a military pilot. My first operational missions were over Bosnia. In between the two Gulf Wars, I ended up doing reconnaissance missions over northern Iraq. And that's the first time and the only time, luckily, I've been shot at.
Oh.
So David, welcome to the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, the best hangar in the Royal Air Force.
What a sight. These are the aircraft that helped win the war, and what's unique, they are still flying.
These are aircraft that every time I walk in here, I have to pinch myself. 12 very iconic aircraft. 6 Spitfires, a Hurricane, Lancaster, Dakota. There are very few places that have got this amount of history under one roof, so I'm incredibly proud to be the boss here.
Of the thousands of Spitfires that were built, about 60 are still flying. 6 of them are here.
All of our Spitfires here are generally different. So this is a Mark IIA Spitfire, the only one still flying that actually took part in the Battle of Britain. So in 1940, this was protecting Britain from Nazi invasion.
It's hard to miss another legendary aircraft in this hangar.
This Avro Lancaster, she is the jewel in our crown. She'll turn more heads than any of the fighters put together. Whilst I love the sound of the Merlin engine, when you put 4 of them together, you get an incredible harmony.
While Lancasters obviously didn't take part in the Battle of Britain, Coningsby was a wartime Lancaster base, so having this amazing aircraft here seems right. It's also a tribute to the many thousands of aircrew who died flying them.
We've been set up really to commemorate the past, but also to celebrate the future. So a lot of the aircrew here have got other jobs in the Royal Air Force. My replacement in a year and a half's time, Squadron Leader Mark Sugden, He flies Typhoon. He's an instructor just across the road. I've got my Lancaster aircrew fly transport aircraft around the world, supporting operations and peacekeeping.
It's not just the aircrew. Just like in wartime, it takes a dedicated ground crew to keep these aircraft flying.
I come from a very small town in the middle of Devon. I hadn't seen much of the world, and the Air Force was a route to achieving that. I've been in for 30 years now. Spent 20 years in the ranks as an avionics technician. Spent 10 years on the Tornado, so I was in Gulf War II, Bosnia as well, so I've got quite an extensive operational background.
How many crew do you have to work on these machines?
So I've got 37 engineers, including myself.
You don't work on them anymore, you're a boss, are you?
I have to go along sometimes and inspect.
So with these aircraft here, some of them, you know, got to be 80 years old, how long do you think you'll be able to keep them airworthy?
Well, I currently have a plan out till 2035. That's
as long as that.
Sustainable. It's a living museum. Every time one of these flies in the skies, we can always remember what's been before us, the sacrifice that people have made.
Engineer Norman Pringle has spent over 25 years keeping these aircraft flying.
I joined up as an airframe technician, which was nicknamed as a rigger.
We're in.
When I first got to RAF Coningsby, I realised that when I was a kid, I'd done models of these aircraft and airfix models, and I just realised it looks an interesting job.
Right, brakes are off.
The Fabus Lancaster is the first one I worked on. I wouldn't say it's a simple aircraft to work on, but you get a good buzz when you see it flying. But when it has a snag, it tends to be a big one.
Chocks in. Over 7,000 Lancasters were built. Only 2 remain flying in the world. You cannot climb inside and not think of the brave men that flew them. And you can't help but admire the courage of a young man sitting here and flying this machine full of bombs into the teeth of hell. Norman and the engineers have spent the winter taking these planes apart. Now they are getting them fit to fly. It's time to fire up the Spitfire. It has to have its tail tied down because it wants to lift, as if it wants to go.
It wants to fly, it wants to go. Once you start the engine, it wants to go.
Sergeant MAZZA MARRIOTT has the privilege of starting up the Merlin engine.
I joined as an airframe technician, and I spent the majority of my career on Tornado. It is the RAF's finest hour, I still believe, the Battle of Britain, and to work on these aircraft, it's just an incredible experience.
You know, I suppose it's every little boy's dream to go flying in a Spitfire.
Yeah.
I remember having a duvet of a Spitfire cockpit and sitting in there when I was a child. So to be able to sit in one and engine run it's a massive, massive honour.
That's why they called it the Spitfire.
The Spitfire actually was very easy to fly. It was the greatest thrill ever.
Very nice airplane to fly. It's very responsive to control and very docile. It wasn't vicious in any way.
There is nothing quite like the sound of a Merlin engine at full throttle. She definitely wanted to go. Cool, you could see she was straining at the bit there. In March 2020, the flight was raring to go with a full diary of displays when COVID struck.
Before the pandemic this year took hold, we were planning 90 displays and 950 flypasts.
COVID-19 has had a dramatic impact on our operation. It has absolutely devastated the programme.
Britain was in lockdown, and a whole year of public events were in doubt. But as the country faced an unprecedented challenge, an opportunity arose to honour a national hero and raise the nation's spirits.
The first major event of 2020 was Captain Tom Moore and his amazing over £30 million worth of charity money raised for the NHS.
It was suggested that maybe we could combine our training with a surprise fly pass for Captain Tom. We opted to take a pair of aircrafts. I was in the Spitfire following the Hurricane with Mark Discombe flying, leading the formation.
It was brilliant. It felt like we were achieving something. Whilst we weren't going out and doing fly-past and displays, the message of what the flight was and what the aircraft represented was being seen.
Despite lockdown, millions watched the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight salute a wartime veteran. It was their first public fly-past of the year, and it would not be their last.
Yeah.
In this most important year, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight has been closed to visitors since March. VE Day in May was to be their busiest ever with 100 flypasts. All were cancelled, except for one special flight, kept quiet to avoid crowds gathering.
So we did get the chance to actually do something for VE Day in the form of a pre-recorded mission.
We were tasked to go down to the White Cliffs of Dover. The sun was shining, the cliffs were literally radiant. They were like a beacon, and that first sight of home that the veterans must have seen on many a mission was phenomenal. So that's probably, yes, the most poignant sortie I've done. And it was under COVID.
Lockdown lifted in July. The team are now preparing for another special flight and a poignant tribute to a much-loved wartime icon.
Lancaster and 2 Spitfires are going to do a practice display here, and then the Spitfires are going to go down south for this funeral fly past for Dame Vera Lynn.
We'll meet again. Don't know
We're commemorating what she had done as the Force's sweetheart. Her music was iconic. I'd say as iconic as the sound of a Merlin engine of a Spitfire flying overhead. But it was also another passing of somebody that represented the greatest generation that we've had, as I like to think.
I'm sure the aircraft will behave themselves, but we're never there with these things. We just wait for the aircrew to walk out next. Time for a cup of tea.
It's the flight's tradition to ring a World War II scramble bell to let the ground crew know how many aircraft are ready to fly.
Bell was rung, shout of scramble, you ran to your plane. Everything was done in such a hurry. There really wasn't time to think about being scared. You were so involved with what you had to do.
Flying today will be Disco and his right-hand man, Andy PREECE.
I wanted to join the Air Force from a very young age, so it was definitely a childhood dream. I was originally a fast jet pilot. I think, like every other pilot, it was a dream to one day be able to fly a Spitfire. But to do that as well is just something that I never, ever thought I'd be here, given the chance to do it.
A sad and poignant day, a fly past to commemorate and celebrate the life of Dame Vera Lynn. But also a privilege to be part of that, and a fitting part of it. So
there will be few public flypasts this year. Vera Lynn's funeral is a rare exception.
to maximise training, we actually got airborne earlier to fly a practice display with a Lancaster.
The memorial display is our signature display. We'll arrive as a 3-ship formation, do a couple of passes before we then go into the fighter displays.
With no time to lose, Disco and Andy's Spitfires peel off and head south to salute Vera Lynn's funeral.
Something we wouldn't normally do is funerals, but on this occasion, what a fitting tribute to give to such a great lady.
It's time to perfection, to catch the moment when the funeral cortege stops to hear the Merlin engines pass overhead.
It's quite a high-pressure sortie to get there, knowing that the nation's eyes are watching you.
In a normal year, the team would fly past hundreds of small local events on their way to an air show.
Generally, we get amazing feedback from the events we fly over, even the smallest, where people say we had a round of applause. And quite regularly, we hear of people with a tear in their eye, as we like to say in the flight, that day there was a lot of dust in the air.
Back in RAF Coningsby, Norman and the ground crew are on standby.
With 2 fighters coming back in, and then we're going to move the aircraft around to fit them in for this afternoon. A busy little day, but hopefully we gave Dame Vera a fitting send-off.
Yeah, it was great. So I had the easy job of just flying formation. Andy had to get us there at the right time, but it seemed to work.
The engineers give the aircraft a thorough once-over and refuel for the next mission.
During the Battle of Britain, we would have had fitters and mechanics the same way we do today. What we don't have, though, is all the armourers, so the people loading all the weapons. Obviously, our aircraft don't fly with live ammunitions.
Tribute must be paid to the ground crew, who are absolutely wonderful, and we've got them to thank for our aircraft kept flying so well.
The ground crew are a vital part of the winning of the Battle of Britain, not to be understated.
Just finished refuelling, so next job is get the aircraft ready to fly again.
I just like working on the old aircraft. It's just proper engineering.
This afternoon, 5 aircraft will take to the skies to practice a brand new display. It's called Dowding, after the wartime head of fighter command. It will be their signature show to mark the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain.
The aim today is to safely conduct the first go. What we're looking at today is very unusual. The Lancaster will be in formation, so I will be leading the formation with the Hurricane up front, and everyone will see the 5 aircraft together. So I was quite keen to do something that was relatively easy, but very different, so we could maximise what the crowd see.
It's a big day. This is the first time this year that almost all the flight will be in the air together. With only 2 full-time pilots, the rest are all part-time volunteers.
I've got currently 21 aircrew. Of those, I'd say the vast majority have had some sort of experience of going to war.
My dreams of flying started in my mid-teens. I found a local gliding club, and that's really where it all started. My primary role in the Royal Air Force is as a Typhoon instructor on 29 Squadron here at Coningsby, and on BBMF I'm a volunteer. So this is my secondary role in the Royal Air Force.
Like many out there, it has always been a boyhood dream to fly a fast jet. The most nervous I've ever been in the service is my first solo in a Hurricane and Spitfire, an absolute onslaught on the emotion and senses. Our primary role here at Royal Air Force Coningsby is to do a quick reaction alert, protection of the UK, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
During the Second World War, Bomber Command were all volunteers. Today's Lancaster crew are no different.
I discovered that I wanted to be a pilot when I was age 11. From the time that I have been in the Air Force, we've been engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. There have been some dramatic moments. Some of the airdrop that we did at night to the troops on the ground, the repatriation flights that we sadly had to do. There were evenings where I had multiple coffins on the back of my aircraft. A lot of the people who were my heroes when I was growing up were pilots with Bomber Command during the Second World War. So it was very appealing to me to experience what they had experienced by flying the same aircraft.
I can't remember a time when I didn't think about flying or wanting to join the Air Force. I'm very lucky, actually. I've had a very varied background. Also done a little bit of time over Afghanistan as well. I now fly the AWACS out of RAF Waddington. I've always wanted to fly the Lancaster. I think the aircraft represent a very special time in our history of very special, selfless people, brave people.
You might have seen that we touched the plaque on the rear of the aircraft, and that's slightly superstitious, I guess, but 55,573 of Bomber Command didn't make it through the war. So it's nice to feel that in some way we're taking them along with us whenever we go flying.
The losses were catastrophic. In one night raid over Nuremberg, 96 Lancasters were shot down. 545 bomber crew lost their lives, more than all the aircrew killed in the Battle of Britain.
Today, we only have 4 people on the airplane. During the war, there were 7 or 8 crew.
The Dowding display is designed to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, and it requires the Lancaster bomber and 4 fighters.
I think Dowding, though, is the time where I get really animated because we're all flying together, and it's rare that the entire flight is up at the same time.
It takes very skillful flying to get up close and personal with a Lancaster bomber.
It's me leading in a Hurricane, which is unusual, with a Lancaster tucked right in behind me, and that is definitely an odd thing when I look over my shoulder and see a 4-engine heavy bomber sort of 15 feet behind me, with the Spitfires on the wing and behind the Lancaster.
Clouding the flight head. Right, go.
The Battle of Britain, I think, is probably the highest battle honour that the Royal Air Force has. And had it not been for the victory in the skies above, then there was a very real possibility that a land invasion would have ensued. So an incredible victory against all the odds.
As the first Dowding rehearsal comes in to land for a debrief, I want to know, are they up to scratch?
Sometimes we do things which seems incredible good fun from the cockpit, and actually people on the ground go, yeah. So it'll be important to get that sort of, that side of it, see the aesthetics of it and see if it looked all right.
If you imagine being outside on the wing of the Lancaster, actually every time you roll or move, it's an awful long way out from the point that's actually moving. So it's more of a challenge.
Different. I've asked the people at the fence all pay $5 each. Only a show they're going to see this year.
In 1 week's time, the flight will present their display skills to RAF top brass for approval to show to the public. But not before I get a chance to fly alongside 2 Battle of Britain legends.
Right, so close there.
The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight keeps 12 historic aircraft flying, and all have stories to tell.
Every aircraft we've got here is as original as we can be. So I jokingly say there's an element of Trigger's broom about it. If you want an aircraft to be 100% original, you need to just put it on the ground, put it in a museum and leave it.
Today, I've come to fly alongside 2 of the most famous fighters that won the Battle of Britain, the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane.
Both of these aircraft were instrumental in the Battle of Britain. These type of aircraft, you know, in essence, some would say saved the nation, some would say saved the world. It was the first defeat of the Nazis.
For nearly 4 months in 1940, 54 squadrons of Hurricanes and Spitfires fought the Luftwaffe in skies over Britain. And this is the only flying survivor.
She is the only airworthy Spitfire in the entire world that actually fought in the Battle of Britain. And it's remarkable that she's even with us on the 25th of October, 1940, with a Polish pilot, a young man by the name of Ludwig Martel. He was actually shot down.
In her?
In this very airframe. So he took shot through the left wing, which came through the wing and through the cockpit, and went into his left-hand side and through his left leg.
Good Lord.
And he was rescued, and also, thankfully, the aircraft was saved. And then forward on from there, when they made the film The Battle of Britain, they were able to get her back to flying condition quite easily. And she was used in the film.
So she's a film star?
She is absolutely a film star. So anyone who's seen that film, you've seen this aeroplane.
I think they're both wonderful machines. For me, this is the Land Rover. This is the Aston Martin. This is rugged, dependable, and she gives you confidence. The Spitfire is lighter, more manoeuvrable.
Yes. Does the Hurricane have the same engine as the Spitfire?
So exactly the same, except she's a third heavier. The Hurricane would struggle to get up to the height, certainly to engage the Messerschmitt 109s, where the Spitfire would be able to get up there and engage, you know, on equal terms.
Today, I can't fly in these single-seat fighters, but what I can do is get airborne alongside them.
It's always a great privilege to walk out to one of these aircraft and get into it and go and fly it. It is to do with what they represent. The Battle of Britain itself, you know, the first battle solely fought in the air, and being watched by the people that were being defended, which was incredibly unusual.
Disco is flying the heavyweight Hurricane, whilst Andy is piloting the Battle of Britain Spitfire. I'll be alongside in a helicopter, well, just like the one I fly myself. Thank you, pilot.
Yeah, I know you're desperate to fly it. But,
No, I'll keep my hands to myself.
Here they are now.
First up is the dependable Hurricane.
Currently, Hurricane LF363, always painted in the Battle of Britain colours. She's painted to represent Sergeant Clues, who was a 1 Squadron pilot and the recipient of the Distinguished Flying Medal. So that is the representation of the Battle of Britain.
It was a good, solid aircraft, very manoeuvrable. It wasn't as fast as the Spitfire. It couldn't go to the height of a Spitfire, but it took more punishment than the Spitfire. It was a good aeroplane.
I had a Hurricane which I loved, like a brother. And I didn't know anybody else to fly it. You got very attached to your own aircraft. It's rather like a family dog, you know.
Fair or not, it's always the Spitfire that gets the glory.
We have our Mark IIA Spitfire P7350, and she is an actual Battle of Britain veteran. Currently, she's painted to represent a New Zealand pilot, Al Deer, who flew on 54 Squadron at the time of the Battle of Britain, with his Kiwi motif on the side for good luck, although after the third aircraft with a Kiwi was lost, he decided not to do that later in the war.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, stunning.
She's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The reputation she has is very well deserved. When you get her off the ground, she's very light, she's very responsive. A lot of people describe it almost that you strap her on, that she becomes part of you. A delight to fly.
There he goes, here he comes. Go on now.
It was a very exciting aircraft to be in. It wasn't difficult for a pilot to fly. It would respond very easily to whatever you asked it to do. And I enjoyed my flying.
People will always name the Spitfire as being the most famous aircraft, but actually there were almost twice as many Hurricanes in the Battle of Britain.
The facts are that the Hurricane shot down far more aircraft than the Spitfires did.
Oh, look at that. Oh, so close there.
The average age of the fighter pilots in the Battle of Britain was early 20s, so a similar age to when I started training. Their training was a lot quicker than mine. And for us, when you get near the end of your training, that's what it's all about. It's not about flying at that point. It's about operating the aircraft as a weapon system, and they seem to have completely forgotten that in the war.
Beware of the Hun in the sun was about the only bit of instruction I ever received.
Of all the bullets being fired from Spitfires and Hurricanes, 97% missed. So we were very bad shots, we really are. And the only thing to do is to get as close as you possibly could to the bloke in front. You should almost touch him, then you can guarantee hitting.
But with 300 rounds per machine gun, our fighters only had 14 seconds of firepower.
We talk about, when we fly these aircraft, flying with ghosts. You always feel that there's people who have flown that aircraft who have gone before you. You can't help but remember what it must have been like being in that aircraft, taking it into battle against all of the odds.
They were wonderful men, but very experienced, and that kept them alive. And most of the casualties were the inexperienced people who were joining the squadron one day and being shot down the next.
A good pilot has sixth sense. You know what's around him. He doesn't have to look around. Those who don't get shot down very quickly.
It's hard to put yourself there. The odds they were facing, it was a total war. It was stop them or we would be invaded. And that's very hard to comprehend in today's modern life.
When I arrived at Dispersal, there was nobody there. I learned later that we'd lost 10 pilots in 10 days.
Each aircraft has its strengths and weaknesses, but the Battle of Britain was won by a coordinated effort by the Hurricane and Spitfire, and neither would have been capable of winning the Battle of Britain on their own.
Those guys who flew those things in anger, well, you know, my heart goes out to them because they were so brave. And you get that sense when you see them fly past and go past you at speed. You realise if you were on the receiving end, you wouldn't want to stay about very long.
There he goes. Here he comes. Go on now. That's the victory roll. Good way to end our display.
What a privilege to get a taste of what it must have been like in the skies of Britain in 1940. Now the flight has more to prove. They have to convince RAF top brass to grant approval to display to the public. It's an important day, and I'll have a ringside seat. It's dawn at RAF Coningsby. I have come to help the early shift of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight on one of the most important days of the year. They're going to be assessed to see if they are officially allowed to display in public, and there's a lot riding on it.
Yes.
Yeah, look at that. Pushing the whole thing with one finger. Oh, not a bit.
It's over the hill now, it gets away from you.
Yeah, it does. The ground crew have already been assessed. Now it's the turn of the air crew to show what they can do. I'm going to catch up with them in their pre-flight briefing.
Just gone over Datum. We're extending further south, and all of a sudden you get a catastrophic engine failure. What are you going to do?
And then options are fairly limited, so if I'm lucky, I might be able to get it into the back of the airfield. Otherwise, I'll be straight ahead into one of the fields outside the base.
I'm not going to introduce Sir David Jason. I think everyone knows yourself, sir. So, obviously, we've already had a chat, and I'll be in the lead aircraft at the beginning, in the Hurricane. For this year, the first display you'll see, the Dowding display to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, is a brand new display. So I'm hoping you'll get the wow factor when we first arrive in that 5-ship formation.
I'm relying on you to give me the wow factor. What about getting below 100 feet then? What are chances of that?
None. So, you know, I can say that with confidence until we're landing, and then it's obviously quite important to get below 100 feet.
Thank you so much. Yours truly has the privilege of ringing the scramble bell today.
And that's the process started, so we're now going to go flying.
Great, lovely. I'm going to go watch it.
PDA, public display approval, is really us proving that we are a display team for the year. It's always relatively stressful. This time, because of COVID, I think there was added pressure there.
I think there's a mixture of excitement and anticipation. No one in that crew is there in sufferance. We all want to be there and have volunteered for this duty. So every time we strap in, it's excitement. We're looking forward to the flight.
Ground crew, start checks. Number 3, ignition switches off is clear. On. Clearance, number 3.
Cleared to start, number 3.
Turn 3. Turning 3.
Very excited. You never tire of seeing a Lancaster fly either. And she doesn't fly as much as the fighters.
8 Merlin engines firing up. That's music to my ears.
What now? You know what I'm going to say. Cup of tea.
Well, take off checklist, please. Flight pinstripes. Checks left. And forward right. And flaps.
It's very, very emotive. You can smell the fumes from the exhaust, and that is evocative too. What a sight. 5 historic warplanes taking to the Lincolnshire skies.
80. 90, rotate. Up, gear up. Select. Controls left, right.
God, yes. I'll tell you what. There's nothing like that sound. It never fails to move one.
Double window. Right, gorgeous day. Visual Hurricane. And up left. Up right. 121.50 flaps up. Channel.
Leading the dowding, the interesting bit for me is making sure that we get the formation together, that I'm incredibly smooth.
Spitfires right, 2 o'clock high.
Because everybody else is manoeuvring alongside me. I think the most challenging bit is for the Lancaster.
To be honest with you, I don't really notice the Spitfire behind me or the ones on my wing because I'm concentrating on the lead fighter, which is the Hurricane with the boss in. My sole focus is trying to stay in position behind him, and it's harder than it looks.
To fly alongside the Lancaster is an incredible experience, very difficult to put into words, that not only are you flying either a Hurricane or a Spitfire, you've got the most perfect view of the most iconic bomber aircraft that the Air Force has ever had.
Well, we've been told that they're forming up and they're coming over the control tower. Here they come. Listen. Yeah. Gosh, that is good. That is very powerful medicine, that is. The swan-like formation is the big intro of the Dowding display, and it certainly packs a punch. It's a fitting tribute to the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain.
Looks like we're gaining on him, buddy. Your throttles from now on, pal. Stop it.
Dowding flight break, go.
After the main arrival, where we were a 5-ship, we then positioned away from the crowd, where we then split off all of the fighters to go into individual displays.
Every move is being watched from the control tower by an RAF Air Vice Marshal. They're the adjudicators. They're sort of like, you'd imagine them, they've got numbers going 4, 5, 9 out of 10. It's Andy PREECE's solo display in his D-Day Spitfire, which had 143 wartime missions to its credit.
All Spitfires are lovely to fly, but AB, for me, just has something, just that extra bit special. She handles perfectly. You can almost fly her hands off. She did 143 operational sorties, which is absolutely incredible for an aircraft to still be around, having fought in so many missions. She's powerful, so even though she's only a Mark V Spitfire, she would give some of the later Mark Spitfires a run for the money. So to fly that solo display as well, it's just an absolute delight.
If you ever wondered what a Spitfire was like in a Battle of Britain dogfight, this is it, with Disco and Suggs slugging it out in the sky.
It's lovely to do, actually. You know, they can get a feel for what it must have been like to see 2 airplanes that close, which is how close you'd have to be to get within the effective range of the guns that they had at the time.
Everything depended on the amount of metal you could hit the chap in front with. And of course, with 303 bullets, 97% of which missed, it took a lot of bullets to hit her. Younker's 88, particularly, just absorbed bullets. You'd hit it 100 times, and it'd still go on.
Go on, get him.
I'm credited with destroying 8 aircraft. German ones, not our own.
The Lancaster was Britain's most important heavy bomber. Probably its most famous wartime mission was the Dambuster raid in 1943, and Coningsby was a former home of the Dambuster Squadron. As part of today's display, the Lancaster crew demonstrates a white-knuckle, low-level bomb run at just 100 feet.
Clearly, it feels like you're very close to the ground. Dambusters were doing 60 feet at night over water without any night vision systems. Their feat is pretty much incomparable to what we do.
Arm doors open. Travelling.
They were doing under fire at night with a job to do. It was a really impressive feat.
This is why I admire the bomber boys, because they are briefed for their raid. They then had to face probably a 10-hour trip, possibly, to Berlin with night fighter pilots and all the hell let loose from anti-aircraft guns when they got there, and then do it all the way back again.
You wouldn't want to be on the ground, would you, with that coming at you in anger? Quite enough to frighten the socks off you.
Wings level, below 150, gear down. Select, travel left.
For the public, and then for me, the importance is what she represents with the incredible loss of life. 43% of Bomber Command aircrew being killed. To have her as a living memory for them is hugely important.
Go on, my son. When it turns away from you, you get the full blast of those engines.
I used to be flying 3 or 4 times a day, and you'd be flying 5 hours a day. And you did your sleeping in between flights.
I'll look back, and whilst being incredibly proud of the team, I'll also have the most amazing memories of meeting the veterans, sitting down and talking to them, listening firsthand to what it was like to fly in the Battle of Britain and any of the major conflicts. And that, for me, has been the biggest privilege.
It is important to keep these historic aeroplanes flying because ultimately the sight and sound of them flying is something that you just cannot get with an aircraft that is purely based within a museum.
The final display is Mark FLEWIN and his Mark 16 Spitfire.
It's fantastic to display the Mark 16, the clip-wing Spitfire, which has a phenomenal roll rate, which means that you can do a really tight display. But for me, the really special thing about the Mark 16 is it being painted in Polish Squadron colours. It very much demonstrates what a multinational effort the Battle of Britain was.
I remember meeting a Pole. He said, all I want to do is to get behind a Spitfire with 8 machine guns.
The Polish 303 Squadron Flying Hurricanes claimed the highest number of kills of any unit during the battle. In fact, of the 3,000 aircrew known as the Few, over 500 had come from other countries.
I think we're going to all land and feel fairly content with that.
As they come into land under the watchful eyes of the RAF top brass, I'll go and see how it went for the Lancaster crew. I get very emotional about seeing these aircraft flying. How does it resonate with you guys?
Well, you can't help but think about it, can you?
Agreed. It's on your mind every time you strap in. And as you saw us tapping the plaque on the back, it's our nod to all the Bomber Command veterans that didn't come home.
Now, to find out if the flight has the wow factor to fly public displays this year, Air Officer Commanding No. 1 Group gives his verdict.
Firstly, a thank you to you all. I know it's been really difficult over recent weeks and months to get to where we've got to today. What I saw today was very safe, very professional. And then also we're here to take a look at to see if the display is suitable and appropriate to go in front of the public. And I'm very pleased to say it certainly is. The new Dowding sequence, very impressed with that. You know, really exciting. Thank you for all your work and well done.
Flight, shun. Dismiss. Ladies and gents, back at 10:05 in your display suits, please.
I've been proud of the team from the moment I took command. The energy, the efforts they put in place. We are one team, and that's hugely important for me, that everybody gets the same sense of, there's an element of relief, we've done it. It is a huge team effort to have got us here. If we look back in March, I don't think anyone would have thought that we would have been standing here today in our display flying suits. It's an incredible effort to get here. And I'd like to just one last time say thank you very much.
I would just like to say that the pilots get all the glamour, but behind them as the most important people, I think, is the team. You people who keep the aircraft flying, so well done.
These aircraft can fly forever. We've just got to have the will as a nation and as a service to do that. And right now there is the will to carry on flying these aircraft in perpetuity.
So on this 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, we remember all of the brave who fought and died for freedom.
We lost 500 people killed on our side. The best that Britain could produce was lost during the Battle of Britain.
We were a match for the Germans, but we were fighting over our own country, and we knew what we were fighting for.
And when we say we won the Battle of Britain, it's the whole country that won the Battle of Britain, really.